Sup guys, today we will be watching the patch notes for 25.19 for the League of Legends, the upcoming patch notes, the upcoming update. We will be watching Phreak's video. I like to watch Phreak because he's talking from the developer side, so sometimes there are more details than you will find on the website. So let's watch together.
What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here. I'm the design lead of Summoner's Rift Team's live pod, and I'm here to talk to you about patch 25.19. It's the World's Patch. The contents of the World's Patch are focused on pro and focused on giving strategic champion diversity, so trying to add in things that would be a slightly different look for the lane, or remove things that felt like they were overly dominating choice and thus not leaving room for sort of more variance overall. Stale bans tend to look pretty stale, and so there's basically 4 buckets of changes here. There's buffs for champions where we thought they'd be cool in pro and pro would actually play them, and there were just straight up room in solo queue. They were weak. Ari is an example of this. There are a few nerfs for champs that are just OP kind of everywhere or have bad gameplay and deserve to be weak essentially, and also were really stale in pro, and those again we kind of consider slam dunks. We have a few adjustments of champions that we would like to add some pro skew to. The goal would be win rate neutral. It's okay if it goes up or down a little bit, not a huge deal, but would like to inject them into pro play. And then finally, there are some buffs where their solo queue win rates look mostly fine. We're moving them to roughly 1% win rate overpowered, which to me is a reasonable thing to give out. And if the game is so balanced that 1% win rate OP is game breaking, I just don't agree that that's game breaking. They're 1% OP, but like, that's not a huge price. That's not a huge deal is the way I view it. So let's start with an adjustment here that is actually not done for Worlds. We did this just earlier on last week. I did these changes and developed them. We are making Seraphine, ideally, a better low elo skewed support.
By the way, me as a developer, like I'm not a developer of a specific, I'm not a gaming developer. I'm working in the DevOps sphere. So I do work a lot with the code, but I think it's so cool to be a developer of a game, especially that you love. I think it's a dream job for those who are developers in the world.
And mid laner, those are the primary audiences we're going for here. As far as I can tell, the carry Seraphine audience doesn't really care if they play mid versus bot. Of course, the win rates are very strongly bot skewed, and that'll be very hard to disentangle, but if we can throw a large bone toward mid lane, that's great. I think that's generally a positive thing overall.
I don't know, by the way, about Seraphine, since I'm playing low elo. Like right now I'm in silver. I didn't meet a lot of Seraphine players in the mid lane. The same for support. And I did meet some players that played her as AD carry, like instead of the ADC role. But in general, I think people don't understand how powerful Seraphine is, in my opinion, because she has 2 skills with CC. Like actually she has slow, and she has 2 skills that completely stops the character like from doing something. And I think CC, has a lot of weight in this game for winning when you have a good team comp. So I think people should, like in my opinion, people don't understand Seraphine's powers. And now they are going to buff her, which is cool, because then we might see Seraphine more in the mid lane, in support lane. But let's hear about the changes. Like you can already see them on the screen, but the interesting part is about her W.
Otherwise, though, the big thing we've noticed is that Seraphine is actually pretty strongly elo skewed right now. Regardless of the role you look at, she wins more games, even accounting for mastery by MMR. There's, generally speaking, some interesting biases based on how you look at the data, so not everything...
Sorry, I didn't notice that I have the camera frame. Let's continue.
Can be taken at sort of first glance, but we're pretty sure, based on a lot of how these abilities sort of function, that this champ has some pretty innate elo skew. That said, she's much more commonly picked in lower elos than high, and so we'd really like to undo that skew and revert it if possible, because where her audience is where she's weakest, and that's not great.
And it's interesting what he's saying about the low elo, because I do play a lot low elo. Maybe he's talking about the iron, but I think that silver is still low elo. So I didn't meet Seraphine a lot, to be honest. But he does have the details about the top picks per elo, so he knows what he's talking about.
Has generally been a big driver of the work done on Seraphine, because the largest portion of her audience is low elo support players, and we will continue to try to do as much as we can to make those players satisfied, because they're the overwhelming majority of Seraphine players. Anyway, so the changes, we're actually going to go from bottom to top here. Q amping damage versus monsters is just a very small thing that I've seen Seraphine players ask for. This is almost no power, but feels good, and so sure, here you go. Q now has its missing health damage amp against monsters, which should just kind of feel good, and for any of her carry rolls, which she walks over and helps kill Dragon or Baron or Grubs or whatever, congratulations, up to 75% more damage on the ability that you max first. Next set of changes are just meant to be low elo skewed and mid lane skewed. Growth stats tend to be low elo skewed. Growth stats tend to be mid lane skewed, because you gain more levels in both of those things. And so 5 HP growth, she has generally really low HP growth. There's room for this without being one of the tankier champs in the game. I'm trying to get us to 100 health per level or lower on ranged champions. That'll be a sort of very, very long place to go to, but trying to somewhat tamper down XP snowballing in the game. Very, very long-term project, not going to happen anytime soon, but if there's room and it makes sense, going to go for that one, as I've been going after armor growth as well for the same kind of reasons. Next one up is just straight up 15 MP growth. One thing I saw for mid lane Seraphine is they were often buying 2 mana items. That's pretty unfortunate. Unless you're specifically a mana mage, it feels pretty bad to have to buy 2 mana items, and so softening that out and making it so that Seraphine can more likely buy Rylai's and self combos a lot.
To be honest, they can maintain her mana also by reducing the mana cost per skill. I know that in low elo, a lot of players who are like, I'm playing AD carry, so I usually play against support players that are spamming their skills, so within the first 3 minutes they are already running out of mana. Instead of keeping it for the real fights, they are spending all the mana. So now, in low elo, in my opinion, Seraphine will be spamming more of her skills. I mean, plus 15 MP is not much, but it's plus 50, plus the regen that she's getting over the time. So it will allow her to cast, how many? 2 more times maybe, or 3 more times her skills, which is, for the mid lane, it will make her stronger. It will make her more sustained on the lane. About the HP growth, it's a nice buff, yeah.
And feels good about that one. And so a really big swing in mana pool overall. Actually, it's probably going to be a lot of win rate, but hopefully feels really good. The biggest change, though, is this one. It is changing the functionality of Seraphine's W healing and going from, instead of 3 to 5% missing health per target, aka if I'm healing myself, I'm getting 3% missing HP. If I'm healing 5 people, I'm getting 15% missing HP to each one, which means that ability quadratically scales based on the number of champs nearby. That's going to roughly triple the output, but linearly scaling, so that no matter how many are inside, they're each getting 8, 10, 12, 14, 16% missing health. This is directly a laning phase buff in bot lane, where it's 6 instead of 18, or sorry, 8 instead of 16. In mid lane, it's a massively large buff where it's 8 instead of 3 to yourself. So anything with 3 or fewer champions is stronger. Much later on, anything with 3 or fewer champions is still stronger. Because you would have gotten 15, now you're getting 16, so we'll see. There's a chance this is a substantial overbuff. We might have to pull some power out of this one. At first glance, we'll probably just pull power back out of W and not like compensation nerf Q or E or something. That is not my first glance here, but essentially the goal of this is so that Seraphine is still clearly the team fight wombo combo champion, the mage enchanter hybrid, I want to be around my team. That's still going to be true. The passive scales off it, the E scales off being near a teammate who has some CC. The W hits your entire team with like very generous ranges here, but not requiring to scale quadratically means that if your top laner doesn't understand how Seraphine works and they walk out of the circle, they're also denying their entire team more healing. And it's usually really, really obvious that
I think most of the players in low elo doesn't even know about it. In my opinion, if I was playing support, I would pick her more often. I did play sometimes support lane because I usually am auto-filling, and I did play with most of the champions in the League of Legends. And I always prefer to play champions with CC. Even if you watch maybe sometimes you watch my videos, I always trying to insist in the chat to pick up someone with CC. But low elo, the problem is that players are kinda don't understand how meaningful all this CC stuff and the whole team comp for the mid-late game. So they trying to pick up characters to look for kills as a support, to farm, stealing the minions and so on. So I'm not sure how meaningful it is with the low elo. Let's continue.
Any coordination skewed abilities skew toward players being better. Here's a random story, actually. I was having lunch with, I think I was having lunch with Jat. I know it was with Jat, but I think we were having lunch together. This was like years ago, back when I think it was either he was currently or had recently stopped being Team Liquid's head coach. And he was saying that they were doing a VOD review. They're playing a Seraphine game. They're like reviewing a game and like, wait, why does Seraphine W heal so much here? And they like went and like reread the tooltip and looked at the wiki and like, oh, it scales times the number of people. So actual pro teams who are scrimming with Seraphine also sometimes don't know how the mechanics work. So
you see, so I was wrong. So based on the information he has, even the pro players doesn't know about it.
Yeah, that's kind of thing where we probably shouldn't be tying it to your teammates knowing what's going on. I think this is just kind of good for the game overall, though still really want to give Seraphine the room there. One other thought, I'm just going to go on to Seraphine for a little bit longer here. I think it's actually important that W has a relatively long cooldown. The output of double W is very, very big. And to me, the making her make choices around the cadence of what spell to double cast, I think is actually required. That W is sometimes a punishing cooldown where you're like, actually, I need to wait and not cast any spells for 2 seconds because I can't get the rotation back in time to get the double W, so I'm going to stop DPS. And making that a choice that Seraphine players actually make, I think is actually good for the champion, to let you put some mental thought into, I don't need damage yet, I'm going to wait for the double W. And maybe you don't want it, that's fine. It's actually why I raised the damage amp on Q, was to make double Q make more sense in some situational cases. I think we could still go harder on situationality being better in these spots, but that's kind of the thought behind the cooldown there, because W is so target agnostic and so like untargetable and very wide and very easy to use, and in a lot of cases contextless, that cooldown is a way to inject context where it doesn't become Sona W. Seraphine W should not become Sona W. It should be very different feeling spells. Let's finally move on. Other stuff going on here. Next up is systems and adjustments, so kind of grouped up together. First thing is a scripting change I did to Celestial Opposition. Actually, really straightforward scripting change here. It no longer triggers while the wielder is dead. What this functionally means, if you do in fact one-shot someone Celestial, it won't pop for the slow, but it also means pretty directly that if you fight a Nico clone, the Nico clone will always die before this timer ticks down, because that's just how Nico clone works, and so Nico can't dive bomb in a slow. This is, I think, a good change pretty strongly. One thing worth noting that was on live is that there was no VFX or SFX that would play if the target was already dead when this blew up, and so you would just be slowed somewhere randomly just from the ether with no, there's no countdown, there's no visual, there's nothing going on, so it looked really buggy. It was, again, really easy change, but just had to prioritize getting it on my plate, and then, it took actually 5 minutes. Finally, fixed. Good change here. This is, of course, a pretty direct, direct, indirect Nico nerf. It's not going to affect many other champions much. Not like we see Wukong running around with this item, but that's there. Next systems change is Redemption. This item has been sleeper OP for a very, very, very long time. Pros were playing it a fair amount, but they've really all glommed onto it now. Solo queue pick rate, I think, went up around 30% this.
That is what I wanted to say, that I didn't see it much in the low elo, the redemption. I'm playing with the Seraphim in Aram, and I'm always buying redemption. I think, like, in Aram, it's less important than in ranked game, but still it gives you some amount of heal to the whole team.
Patch, as players realized, oh, redemption's the best item of the game. It's been that way. There's pretty often situations where this is like the best item or the best rune or the best whatever, and people are kind of slow to pick it up. In this case, we're having that happen here. Apologies for the jump cut. Had to go let my dogs out. Anyway, yeah, next up is Unsealed Spellbook. This was one where we buffed it, half a year ago? And we're at a point now where it is literally... It rounds to 100% pick rate on every single pro play champ in the game except for exactly Nico. It's like literally 95% pick rate on everyone but Nico, who goes, I think, Comet for lane bullying. This indicates this is OP. I don't necessarily mind that supports can sometimes take a sacrifice to get the teleport around the map or do whatever. I think Spellbook is cool. We don't want to delete it from the game. It's interesting that you have the ability to play this high skill keystone and do kind of fun stuff, but it's just OP. The fact that it's completely dominating pick rates means it's clearly too good. It's essentially stale for that reason because there's no keystone choice at all. And so we're nerfing it between where it was before we ever touched it this year and where it has been on live. So in between the two, we'll see what happens. Some will drop off, some will keep playing it. It'll still be around, we're pretty sure, but a nerf in the middle, no big deal. Then we go on to some champion adjustments here. Again, these are meant to be roughly win rate neutral for each case, but intending to skew the champs in ways toward pro play. So first up is Jax. Is a little bit softer than the thing you might have seen on PvE. Jax is getting plus 20/10/0 armor based on rank. On his R, it hits at least one champion. MR is 60% of this, so 12/6/0 on the magic resist. So Jax basically has stronger windowed moments of durability, a little bit early game skewed. Though that said, the value of flat resists, like this ability is extremely strong with late game skewed at its current numbers. Whatever, not a really big deal. In fact, Jax probably should be a scaling champion long term, but is not there right now. He's pretty flat. But a compensation nerf, because this is some real power, is minus 15 flat health. Now, we're actually pretty confident that a windowed resist increase on R is not a lot of win rate. It's head turning and makes his trades look really good when it's up, but that's not.
I think this change on Jax will make him weaker for those who are playing Jax in the lane. Usually in low elo I do see sometimes Jax is picked up as a support and for the top lane. Of course for the jungler, but I think for the solo lane it will make him, I'm talking about the 50 HP. It will make him a bit weaker for poking damage at the beginning. Like, he will be more vulnerable and will have more chances to die, because usually people making him as a bruiser, so he does have a lot of HP, but sometimes people are also making him full AP. So I think it will impact only on the beginning of the game with the Jax.
Up all that often. There's a lot of short trades that are happening before and around that, and so we're actually pretty sure this is not very much win rate, even the higher number that was on PvE earlier, but still we think it's going to be something, and Jax is already winning about the right number of games in solo queue as it is, and so a compensation nerf of 15 flat health, right? We're giving some early game, taking away some early game, trying not to early game skew the champion any harder than we have to, but trying to do something that we think will be pro skewed, which is usually windows of power, which coordinated teams are better at doing. Syndra, in somewhat of a similar boat, we do actually want to shore up some more of her early game. She's a really strongly scaling pick right now, and we'd like to move that power curve back a little bit more, and so we're adding 5 flat damage on Q. Now, we're also adding some AP ratio on Q, but I can't in good conscience make Q do more than 80 damage at rank 1. It's already functionally unmissable, and I think we can't really bring the numbers higher than that one, so we're pretty ceilinged on rank 1 Q damage, so went for some AP ratio instead of going for rank up damage here. I thought it made more sense overall, was the way I viewed it. Other idea is 2 seconds off the E cooldown. We move this one back and forth over time, but having more ability to fish for picks for the team. I think E tends to be a more pro skewed ability here as well, so that should hopefully do that. And then again, Syndra wins the right number of games in solo queue, and so looking for compensation nerfs. And this is actually going to be dropping her health growth down to 100 and her armor growth down to 4.0, which is the numbers I'm generally trying to lean ranged champions toward over time. Of course, we do have to take down some late game damage to keep up with this. Otherwise, we go back to playing Rocket Tag in the late game. I think the overall outputs of
Yeah, so these changes on Syndra will make her a bit stronger at the beginning of the game.
Durability update were good in terms of combat pacing, but it also means we're just in a spot where XP is too valuable, and slowly over time we can try to lower that, but we're just not there yet. Lee Sin is another adjustment here where we're trying to push him way closer toward being the hard early game skewed champion he was back in time, and so front loading a lot of damage levels 1 through 9. Rank 1 Q, there's no way you're going to have more bonus AD than what this matters for. Rank 5 of Q, you have to go 125 bonus AD, which is basically 2 full items and some Conqueror stacks, which is pretty far into your build at that point. And up until then, when you're 2 items plus Conqueror stacks and then starting your third, you're finally losing some damage on Lee Sin Q, and up until that point, you were clearing faster, you had better ganks, you had better dueling, you had a lot going on. If you think, and to be fair, the number is now minus 20% bonus AD ratio. It was minus 25% bonus AD ratio, which meant it was 100 AD to equal. Even that I still think was win rate positive overall, but to not make people too afraid, we're softening this one a little bit, so it's only a 20% AD ratio nerf. But again, I'm really confident that the Q line itself is win rate positive. If we're wrong, we'll follow up next patch. It's not a huge deal. And pairing it with an armor growth nerf, again, in general, growth stats tend to not be very pro skewed. Even though pro games do go longer than your average solo queue game, they're much more about early control, and having slightly more stats in a late game fight doesn't tend to matter for them as much as just simply all the early pressure compared to solo queue where things are just more chaotic, and being 2% stronger than somebody actually still matters a lot, and can have some win rate impact. Moving on to somebody.
I think my opinion about Lee Sin, these changes will make him stronger at the beginning, but as a jungler, because usually when Lee Sin using his Q, he has to land his Q directly on the target. So those who will be picking up Lee Sin usually on the top lane or support in low elo, it will be harder to land it on the champion, the enemy champion, because usually the normal champion, the enemy champion will be standing behind the minions. So I don't know how crucial this change will be for those who will be solo laning. And yeah, let's see. It's interesting. I think it will make Lee Sin stronger in the jungle. Let's see how it goes.
Actually still matters a lot, and can have some win rate impact. Moving on to buffs, first is Ahri. A pretty simple and straightforward change. We're boosting up her aggressive damage, where when you're in your windowed versions of power during your R, maybe you go for a Malignance, get it more often, you are getting substantially more base damage. Ahri right now is already very, very pushed in AP ratios. She has among the most aggressive AP ratios for her base damages in the game among the Mage Sphere. Not the highest in the game, but she's still up there. And so to me, we're meant to boost some base damages somewhat. To smooth that out a little bit, this helps slightly lower snowballing if you can help it. Also, in general, the less snowbally a champion is, the more likely pros are to pick it up, just due to the fact that they're going to be a little bit risk averse. And so if you have a guaranteed late game versus you only have a late game if you have a bunch of gold, and then you might get ganked or lane swapped on or whatever, that's the kind of thing that pros will tend to shy away from. So Ahri will have a little bit more of a guaranteed late game here for sure. But overall, just R is the kind of thing that makes her play high risk, makes her play high reward then to get the resets, and I think it's a pretty exciting place to give.
Yeah, I agree. Because Ahri using her R, she's basically dashing closer to the enemy. So she's risking her life. And I think it's like the risk and the reward, as he said, are balancing her here. But let's see, maybe it will make her OP, especially like definitely she will become OP against squishy champions.
Ahri some power, so this is where it's going. Brand is weak pretty much everywhere. We think we have a chance at getting some Brand jungle in pro play, which would be kind of cool. So these buffs are ideally mid skewed and jungle skewed and less skewed towards support. Mid and jungle have the most room and win rate, but all of his primary roles are a little bit weak. So 10% AP ratio on W is going to help wave clear and carry power. 5% AP ratio on R is not a huge buff, but it's still there. Brand R has a pretty weak AP ratio overall. I think this champ in general has pretty bad AP ratios, considering his passive has no gold scaling at all and carries a lot of his damage. So this is a champion who really doesn't need gold to do well. Unsurprisingly, he's a support in a lot of cases for that reason. And
I hate Brand when I'm playing in the bot lane and someone picks him up as a support. I think he has excellent poking damage. If you are a normal player and you're using your skills, I think he has great poking damage, and he is annoying at the beginning. So now he's getting buffed with his W. This is the one. This is the skill usually the support players are spamming. So I think to me as an ADC player, playing against Brand now will be even more annoying.
And because we thought we had a little bit of room here as well, I know it's a very, very small increase, but Brand's passive monster mod is a very, very, very sensitive lever. And so going from 2.6 to 2.65 looks kind of like a joke, but this is almost 1% win rate jungle by itself, as funny as that kind of sounds. But turns out you hit some really meaningful breakpoints and you go one spell less and it just kind of matters.
Okay.
Caitlyn has been pretty bad win rate for a while. I think she probably will always be a little bit win rate suppressed because of how...
I don't know. Caitlyn, this is my main ADC, and now she was getting buffed. Plus 2 AD is not so meaningful, like, but still seeing that Caitlyn is getting buffed is making me feel good. I don't know, I play with her most of my games. I don't know how it is like in a high elo, but she's hard, I believe, until she gets her first 3 full items. And from there, she's becoming insane. Of course, it depends if you're winning the lane or losing the lane, and how much you're gapping from your opponent. But I don't know, I'm winning most of my games with Caitlyn, and I do carry my lane in most of my games.
Reliable of a lane bully she is. There's plenty of champ archetypes where they just have slightly lower win rates than you would just look at dispassionately, and the champ will still feel good to play and feel strong to play against. Caitlyn is probably one of these. Caitlyn is pretty far below that bar right now, though, and so we're going plus 2 AD. Using this one as a lever specifically because we think her spell outputs are already pretty strong. We don't want to boost like baseline durability, and so saying, well, you're going to right click better. It's, you know, your headshots is a little bit stronger. It feeds into Q damage as well. Your sieging and pushing is going to be slightly faster, and it's going to be more auto attack focused. Diana jungle, pretty bad. Diana mid, already pretty solid. And so instead of trying to find a Frankenstein list that would be jungle skewed, just going to go for the simple thing of passive monster mod. Now, Diana is already one of the fastest clearing junglers in the game. She's going to move from top 15 to top 10 with this. But still, again, one of the fastest in the game, but Diana jungle kind of sucks. And so we move in this direction. Draven is theoretically numerically balanced in solo queue with mastery, but we think has some room to move up and give him a little bit more reliability. By the way, R is plus 25, not 15. Typo on my sides here, sorry. 10% attack speed on the W and 25 damage per hit on the R. Keep in mind, R does have damage decay via the number of targets it goes through, so it won't always be like 50 damage to the target you go for at any time. But some more upfront damage and some more overall trading power on Draven. And even if you go into late game, right, you catch your axes, you keep attack speed on, have more teamfight throughput, just generally more Draven throughput overall. Jinx, this is actually going to be a pretty small buff. Again, this is a champion who's numerically kind of balanced in solo queue, but it's funny, I look at her contemporaries like Jinx, her contemporaries like Sivir, who have like the same pick rate, the same win rate, and then Sivir's ban rate is like 9x what Jinx's is. And so as much as Jinx is relatively popular, like she's number 5 pick rate 80.
I think the Q is a pretty good buff here. Okay, maybe I'm talking from my side because I'm playing via Caitlyn. I mean, I'm playing as Caitlyn, so when I'm playing against Jinx, her main poking damage is her rockets. So basically, I think with the Q range, maybe she will be outranging me. Even now, when I'm poking Jinx, she can reach me with her Q. So I don't know. I think it makes her kind of stronger.
carry right now. She basically never stomachs a ban rate until she's actually meta defining, and she has half the pick rate of Kai'Sa, so she's not meta defining. Jinx can eat some win rate for now. Also, I want to kind of point out that I would argue that Jinx is slightly below average for AD carry agency. Yes, when she gets the resets, she really pops off, but she's not in like full control of getting her own resets. And so Jinx will often tend to be a champ who's allowed to sit a little bit above what would otherwise be dispassionately numerically balanced. And I think it's actually a pretty small buff overall. 20 damage on E is going to tend to combo with tank supports, which are much more commonly in pro play. Some extra rocket range, levels 1 through 8, not that huge of a deal. Again, by level 9, nothing happens anymore, but you got some early game laning phase power. We think both these things are going to be pro skewed. We would like to see Jinx as one of the hyper carry AD carries that are played, as we've nerfed Sivir later on in this patch. We nerfed Yunara recently, things like that. So we hope there's room for Sivir. LeBlanc's another one where we think she can stomach some win rate. She's already, I mean, she's not super popular. She's already got a ban rate. She's winning a decent number of games, but we think there's room to push her up, primarily because, hey, we really want to see if we can get some more assassin picks in mid lane. LeBlanc is usually one of the closest ones to doing so. We have seen some Kiana jungle. That's awesome. We're happy that's there. But again, LeBlanc, we hope we can see some play in mid lane. We're trying to skew toward sort of the extended side laning patterns here. So the primary buff is 10% AP ratio on W, which should be a fairly big deal and be pretty impactful for making her feel like she has wave control and some trading power and whatnot. And then through the feedback of one of our mid laners on gameplay analysis was like, hey, it feels kind of weird if RW has a lower AP ratio than W. So just to keep up with it, we're adding 5% to RW. This is not the primary buff, it's just to make sure that the AP ratio isn't lower than the non-mimic version. I think only Q has.
Let me move my camera. I just now noticed that it's hiding the Mel.
Has a
changes.
Not the same AP ratio now, because I think RE versus E have the same AP ratio on both halves of each spell. Next change is Lilia. We're buffing her. Again, trying to go for a coordination skewed buff here. Lilia, of course, has room for win rate.
I don't know why they need to buff her. Like, in my opinion, Lilia is OP. Whenever someone picks her up, like, usually they're picking her up in the jungle lane. She's OP, even she's losing. She can poke with her damage. She has CC. I don't know. Usually when I'm playing a game as a jungler, I'm banning her. I hate Lilia. I think, in my opinion, she's OP. Maybe it's in low elo, but in my opinion.
In solo queue, but also we would like to see some AP junglers at Worlds, and so 50 flat damage on R and 5% AP ratio on R, we think is going to be, again, coordination skewed, windowed power, things that your teammates can play around, and so saying, here you go, Lilia, you have this to hopefully do well in a more coordinated environment, and going for a little bit early game skew with the 50 flat on R to make her a bit more of an early game snowball pick, run over the game, and yeah, you get that first R pick, you're feeling pretty good. One change I forgot to list here, this is my fault, is there's also a 10-second cooldown buff here on the R as well. So I think it's 140 to, I think on live it's like 150 to 110. Now it's 140 to 100, I think. Either way, it's a flat 10-second cooldown buff on the R cooldown. Final buff of the patch is Mel. We are strongly buffing her passive. Mel is numerically clearly very, very weak, arguably the weakest champ in the game, accounting for mastery. And yes, she stomachs a very, very high ban rate, but moving her power toward things that are, I would argue, much more fair and also high skill skewed. Mel tends to be really strongly low elo skewed as well. So if we can...
I don't know, but Mel, like those who know how to play Mel, she can be OP. Whenever I'm playing as Mel, I think it's the W, the one that reflects the spells, or the E, I can't remember. It's OP. If you know how to play against the champions you are playing, if you know their skills, like imagine that this reflection skill gives you actually an extra skill. So when you are using it on time, like I played against Lux, she couldn't land on me Q. Every time she tried to land on me Q, she was actually in stun. Like, it's OP. It's OP. People just have to learn how to play her.
Try to flatten out some MMR skew, give a lot of win rate. We're willing to give her 2% win rate here.
By the way, I had a game a week ago. I played against Mel, and there was at some point, I saw her. I put my W, I played with Caitlyn, my trap. She stood on the trap. And then I enabled my combo, used my Q, and then wanted to auto shot her. She enabled her W. I killed myself with one shot. This is how it works, guys.
By the way, we think she's incredibly weak. Yeah, she has some ban rate, but like her passive being better is not going to drive ban rate really. So anyway, also one thing I'm doing is I am playing up level scaling, which should push toward mid lane being stronger, but pushing even harder on AP ratio. Regardless, the big thing is we think the passive is pretty strongly high elo skewed. Using auto attacks well will just tend to be a high elo skewed thing on mages overall. And so yeah, it is a pretty strong buff. This is the total damage per spell if you cast 3 spells. This is tripled. So a pretty strong, 24-ish damage increase at level 18, but tripling the AP ratio. Now, to be fair, this AP ratio does feed into the rest of her passive. Each thing will actually give a passive stack that has its own AP ratio and scaling whatnot as well. Still, though, there's a lot of room here. Like the total throughput AP ratio is still not very good. Even if you were to account for R and things like that, there's a lot of room for making this better, scale with gold and all that stuff. So moving forward on that with Mel, again, intending to be an elite skewed buff for Mel. On to the nerfs. Only 4 champion nerfs here. We've nerfed, of course, a couple of systems here overall. Corki, pretty stale. I think actually the number 1 presence AD carry behind Yunara, who was just recently nerfed. Varus can use to lose presence by patch. Players have, I think pro players kind of finally realizing, okay, lethality Varus is not a strong enough go-to, but 10 flat damage off the Q and 5% off the AD ratio as well. Try not to only go for early in Corki power. This does put Corki at numerically a little bit weak for solo queue overall, which is too bad. I think we need to move up his PvP power versus wave clear ultimately, so have to figure out some numbers that are going to move that around. But Corki so trivially clears waves that he has just persistent prio in pro, and has to do some unwinding here, but he's still in a much better state than he was when he had last time we saw him when he had package. He's got a real pick rate, he's got some real play, like he's in a much better state win rate wise compared to pro or solo queue presence. But yeah, right now a little bit stale in pros, moving him down. Pantheon, we're basically declaring dead in the jungle here. Honestly, Pantheon's jungle gameplay is very, very low quality. It's click W on them, receive a stun. Absolutely zero variance, absolutely poor gameplay. Doesn't have to really walk very close compared to like Udi or Bear Stance. I'm going to keep calling it that forever. There's a reason we haven't made TF jungle any good, because Walk at You gold card is, again, there's no gameplay there. So ideally trying to make these, have some real sacrifices for having trivial ganks like this. And so clear speed being one of those. So pretty substantial hit to the monster mod here on the Q, taking some down off the W as well because we can. It's just an easy lever to hit here. Panda's going to have a pretty bad jungle clear. If you want to take a bad jungle clear to get good ganks, you certainly can, but he's going to be one of the weaker champions and has just continued to be the top champ in pro play jungle for a while. And yeah, again, gameplay quality, not great. So if Pantheon jungle goes away, that's fine. He's still very playable in the other 3 roles that players actively play Pantheon. There's plenty of Pantheon to go around in roles where he's viable. Poppy is somewhat similar.
In low elo, Pantheon is being picked a lot as support, which is good in my opinion, because he has stun, he can poke with his Q, and he can block damage. She's kind of reminding Braum. He's kind of reminding Braum. But in most cases, I meet really newbie players. Before recording this video, I had a game where I had the Pantheon as a support. He was killing my minions. He was going in fights only to get kills, especially if there is someone with low HP, even 1v3. And I'm not talking about, risking if you are killing someone with the reward. He was just, he was just trying to get kills. And he thought that he can carry the game, but the opposite happened. He fed the team, he was useless, and we lost the game.
Similar boat here where, different boat, let's rephrase this. Poppy is numerically overpowered in all 3 of her primary roles, top, jungle, and support. So we had room for generic power down. That's why for a while the nerf on the PvE was minus armor growth, because actually top was the most overperformant of the roles. And armor growth, of course, would be a top lane skewed nerf. That said, then we said, you know what? Poppy doesn't really have a lot of presence in solo queue overall, especially in jungle and top. She's not that popular. It's still mostly in support. And so we said, okay, well...
I like Poppy as a support. Poppy goes as an excellent combination with Vayne, with in my opinion with Caitlyn. She's very tanky. She has CC. Just a player has to know how to play her.
We're doing this nerf mostly for pro play jungle then, and so we'll nerf Poppy for pro play jungle. This will give her one of the slowest clears in the game. We buffed it for a while to give her some jungle skew, but again, she's like actually the number one pro jungler, I think even ahead of Pantheon. So going back 25 on the minion monster damage cap on the Q, this is going to, of course, make this ability quite a bit weaker for the jungle clear. Also, for a couple of years, you'd been able to full channel your R and get it on a 15-second cooldown, which really meant that in coordinated play, you were able to get 2 shots at R in a given fight, because you would kind of say, we're starting Dragon, I'm going to walk up and posture and channel R here, and the fight would often take longer than 15 seconds to posture fully out, so you would just get it back and try again, and if you found a good avenue in either one, you would then commit to the fight.
By the way, I think there is a bug with Poppy's R. I will try to report it to Riot. Whenever I don't think it's a feature, but whenever Poppy uses her R and she kills someone, the body, like the dead champion laying on the ground, is lifting like 2 times. It's to me like the animation is being looped for 2 more times. I have a short somewhere in my channel, but to me it seems like a bug, not a feature.
Generally speaking, we want these things to exist to be like, oh, okay, they canceled you. You didn't get your spell off, so you don't get the full 2-minute cooldown, but like it's gone for the fight. They canceled you. I think generally speaking, holding this to buy space and doing it again in the same fight, that's usually too far above the line. And so going back to 30 here is like, look, it's clearly down for the fight. No, you don't get to unless it's a really, really long standoff, in which case, okay, fine, congratulations. But yeah, not gameplay we really want to support. And we think it's going to be pretty strongly pro-skewed because they're going to actually use that mechanic pretty well. So off that one goes. Sivir, numerically overpowered AD carry, nothing else to say here. The choice of tactic is, again, trying to push Sivir toward 2 things here, basically. One, attack speed items on AD carries kind of suck. One of the reasons why is because my theory is due to power creep and having to keep things be stronger. We've generally not given AD carries better auto attacks. There's a reason I buffed the attack speed cap in the game to let them go a little bit higher there, for example. I'm a proponent of going back to 2.0 crit damage as well for a similar reason, but essentially AD carries have had to have really, really high AD ratios on their spells because it's the only thing we were able to give them power on. When the crit damage went down, everything else went down. Because attack speed has a cap. So anytime we can, I believe, swing back down on AD ratios on spells, especially if it's not a specific caster ADC. Like, for example, I don't have a problem with Lucian having good AD ratios on his spells because it's Lucian. He's a spell slinging AD carry. Similar for Jhin here, right? But in the case of Sivir, it's like, no, you're Ricochet. Like, that is why people play Sivir, is because Ricochet is Pog. And we should preserve that as much as possible to let her feel good about herself and feel like a good champion. Okay, that means our power is going to come from things like Q ratios, that your power is more about auto attacks. And because Q AD is less of the power budget, you have room for things like a Phantom Dancer or Hurricane or whatever. Not that you'd really go Hurricane, it doesn't make any sense, but leaving up room for things like that structurally over time, moving the roster that way for those who are auto attack first AD carries, I think is a good thing overall.
Yeah,
that's going to be the patch. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Okay, so it's an interesting patch. I think not many players even reading the patch notes in the... oops, let me just cancel. I think not many players are reading the patch notes, so sometimes they even are not aware of the changes about the champions they're playing against, about the champions they can pick up now. But we'll see how it goes. I think Seraphine pick rate will be increased, especially in the mid-high elo, because I think this is where players do read the patch notes. Low elo, I don't think they are doing it. By the way, I'm low elo, but I'm playing for many years this game, so I do want to know against who am I playing and what are the changes in my champions that I usually play. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel for more videos, and don't forget to like, share the video. See you later!